The National Desk, America's News Now. Breaking news right now, more than 55 million Americans under air quality alerts as smoke all the way from Canadian wildfires is blanketing parts of the U.S. The White House issuing this warning.
We encourage everyone in the impacted areas to listen to their state and local officials.
And the GOP field continuing to grow today, how voters view the 2024 presidential candidates as they take jabs at each other and who could be their ultimate challenger.
The crises we face, to borrow a phrase, are all man-made. And that man is Joe Biden.
Then a former officer on trial after the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history, as new research reveals troubling statistics about gun violence. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Eugene Ramirez, and we are following some breaking news as we come on the air now. More than 55 million people dealing with air quality alerts right now across 13 states. You're looking live here at the nation's capital. You can see just how hazy it is there. As for New York City, you can barely see the skyline right now. The smoke coming from wildfires in Quebec and eastern Canada. And at this hour, it's made its way into nearly half of the continental United States, impacting some 100 million Americans from Massachusetts to North Dakota, from northern Florida all the way west to Texas. Take a look here at the EPA's Air Quality Index map. Look closely here. The orange and red areas you see there, those are areas considered unhealthy right now, especially for those that suffer from asthma or other respiratory problems. But if you look closely on the top right of your screen there, the area stretching just south of Buffalo, New York to north of Philadelphia, the purple and maroon spots there. The air quality index there exceeds 200 right now, meaning that it's hazardous just to be outside. The EPA and the New York Department of Environmental Conservation saying that the air quality index in New York City hit at least 392 this afternoon. Meanwhile, NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, warning that exposure to the particles in this smoke can cause not only headaches and difficulty breathing, but also irritated eyes and sinuses, chest pains, asthma attacks, fatigue, and irritated throat, as well as some increased coughing as well. Many people experiencing those symptoms now. Meteorologist Marshall McPeak breaks down what we can expect in the days to come here.
When you burn something in your fireplace or at a bonfire, you may notice that the smoke has all kinds of particles in it, little pieces of ash and pieces of the things that are actually burning. Those are called particulates, and they can float around in the air and travel huge distances. The ones that we measure are 2.5 microns and bigger, and those are the ones that can create air quality issues. What's driving this? You see that big low pressure center on the East Coast, that big giant swirl near Maine? That is dragging the air from the wildfires around and down into the Great Lakes. Some high pressure out in the middle of the country is also helping to pull that through here. So what we end up with is a lot of it in the Great Lakes and Ohio River Valley, as well as out along the East Coast. Some of the worst air quality now is in the New York and Boston areas, but as we go through the next couple of days, we're going to see that get even worse. Look what happens in the Great Lakes by early Thursday morning and even into the afternoon. It continues to bring that smoke right into the region. The Great Lakes end up with plenty of smoke by Friday morning, and the East Coast metro area is not getting much better. However, by the weekend, the wind finally changes direction, and we start to see some improvement in our air quality.
Marshall McPeak, thanks so much. Now, the smoke haze is also impacting air travel right now across the country. LaGuardia Airport in New York issuing a ground stop at 2 p.m. just several hours ago, and Newark Liberty International in New Jersey suspending all incoming and outgoing flights until midnight due to low visibility. The FAA saying that the hazy conditions also affecting flights through Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and the Washington, D.C. area. At least 3,200 flights have been delayed today. 145 have been canceled so far across the country. We'll keep an eye on future cancellations for you. We're also learning some new details today from the tragic graduation shooting in Richmond, Virginia. Police said one of the victims, graduating senior 18-year-old Sean Jackson, was directly targeted by the suspect, Amari Pollard. Jackson and his stepfather, Rento Smith, 36 years old, were killed yesterday in a mass shooting at the Huguenot High School graduation that's on the campus of VCU. 5 others were shot, including 4 adults and a 14-year-old boy. One of the adults is being treated now for life-threatening injuries at the VCU hospital. The 19-year-old suspect was arraigned this morning on 2 counts of second-degree murder. Amari Pollard is being held without bond, and further charges are now pending. While in the nation's capital following 2 shooting deaths last night, the district has now surpassed 100 homicides in the first 5 months of this year. This is the fastest that Washington, D.C. has hit that 100 homicide mark since the year 2003, 20 years. Last year at some point, Washington had 85 homicides at the same part of the year. New research finds that gun deaths right now in the U.S. reached a record high in 2021. Now, this is according to Johns Hopkins studies. Here, one person died from gun violence every 11 minutes in 2021, reaching nearly 49,000 deaths that year. Gun suicides rose by 8.3% from 2020 to more than 26,300 deaths. That is the largest one-year increase in more than 4 decades. Gun homicides rising by 7.6% to nearly 21,000 deaths. Last month, the Surgeon General issued an advisory about the effects social media has on youth mental health. Now, heading into summer, many parents are thinking about setting boundaries between kids and their devices. But it's not just social media that people should be looking at when it comes to children's mental health. Here's the National Desk's Sasha Elnashar.
So many of America's youth are fighting an internalized battle with mental health struggles. The number of kids and teenagers with anxiety and depression has shot up by about 30% in recent years, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, but many don't get the care they need. Persistent feelings of sadness and suicide attempts reported at higher rates among girls and LGBTQ+ youth, which groups like the National Alliance on Mental Illness are drawing attention to this Pride Month.
I started coming out to friends. A lot of friends decided that they didn't want to or couldn't be friends with me.
Political polarization, spending years apart during the pandemic, more time online, may be contributing to an existing trend of teens spending less time together, observed by researchers at the University of Michigan's Monitoring the Future. Last month, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy called attention to what he calls an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, and issued an advisory about effects of social media on young people, but says more research is needed to understand it fully.
This is the defining public health issue of our time, youth mental health.
In recent months, dozens of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle and both chambers of Congress have introduced legislation to require social media companies to take more steps to protect kids, limit harmful content, and give parents more controls and rights to take legal action against a platform.
So that parents and children can take back their lives.
It is as if children are being robbed of their childhood.
Though many aren't waiting, hundreds of lawsuits have already been filed.
And medical experts are hard at work too, Eugene, to prevent crisis outcomes. For example, doctors at the Children's Hospital in Cincinnati just published a list of recommendations, and one of them is having more mental health care providers at pediatricians' offices to identify treatment requirements and options at a young age.
You know, some of those pressing the social media companies are the same people driving the rhetoric that many would argue is fueling the disproportionately high cases of depression and suicide among LGBTQ youth. But if we're focusing on these social media companies, what are they saying, Asha? What have you heard from them?
Really, they've got a two-pronged response to this specific issue and accusation and attempts by Congress to tighten the regulations. One, they would say, and they do say, that they're already taking steps to protect kids, giving parents tools to limit certain content. There's also filters in place already to, for example, steer someone away from eating disorder content, hashtags, images, things like that. And they've also got boxes that make someone acknowledge and say that they are the age that they are, although those are very hard to enforce or verify. But then secondly, Eugene, they say they talk about the danger to their business model should they be suddenly liable for what's posted on their platforms. Section 230, of course, comes to mind. And these platforms say that if they were required by law to filter out some of this content rather than just do it because of their own policies, well, they would either have to moderate everything or regulate nothing.
Sure. Important for these lawmakers to step back and look at everything impacting kids' mental
Certainly.
health. Asha Elnashar, live in Washington. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Former Vice President Mike Pence officially entering the 2024 presidential race with a video this morning and then a speech in Iowa where he called his former boss and running mate unfit for office.
I believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put them over the Constitution should never be president of the United States again.
North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum also running for president. Burgum's a former computer software entrepreneur. He's scheduled to campaign in Iowa on Thursday and Friday. His announcement adds him to a long list of at least 10 contenders right now for the 2024 Republican nomination to be president of the United States. In the latest Morning Consult poll, former President Donald Trump, who of course Mike Pence was talking about there, still leading by a wide margin. Take a look here, 34 points ahead of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis right now. DeSantis the only other candidate with double digits in this poll here. Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Vivek Ramaswamy, Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie, he joined the race yesterday, all coming in at 3% or lower, so big gap there. Meantime, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons today signing a bill banning gender-affirming care for minors and stopping Medicaid from covering the procedure for adults. Now, this comes after 19 other states have restricted such treatment. Parsons also signing a bill today barring transgender girls and women from female sports teams from kindergarten through college, an issue that many have said is a non-issue and doesn't really impact that many people. The gender-affirming care law will take effect August 28th and will expire in 2027. It's a list that comes out every single year and labels certain groups in the U.S. as extremists. But this year, the Southern Poverty Law Center's list includes several groups who say they don't belong there. But the Southern Poverty Law Center argues that they use fear to attack schools and exclude children. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell with the details.
We are raising awareness, and we are asking for that vote to be passed.
For nearly 20 years, Moms for America has been promoting a, quote, love of liberty, countering what they view as a radical culture shift.
Our main goal is helping moms raise patriots, empower them in their home, help them on their journey through motherhood.
Now the group, along with several others, has been labeled as extremists by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which says they use their causes to intimidate and harass teachers and push legislation to whitewash history. Its annual report features more than 1,200, quote, hate and anti-government extremist groups, including 12 new additions, namely conservative parents' rights groups, including No Left Turn in Education, Moms for Liberty, and Parents Defending Education.
Parents bring lots of different concerns, especially about schools separating students or teachers by their race. And when a group like the SPLC labels us as a hate group for fighting that, it really devalues the meaning of what a hate group actually is.
The Southern Poverty Law Center was founded back in 1971 to fight racial discrimination, namely the Ku Klux Klan. But critics say in recent years they've become more of a partisan progressive group than a civil rights watchdog. In the past, the SPLC has had to walk back designations. In 2014, apologizing to Dr. Ben Carson for placing him on the extremist watch list, even losing a $3 million lawsuit to British political activist Maajid Nawaz, featured here on a recent podcast for including him on a 2016 list of anti-Muslim extremists.
The only reason that makes sense that I'm on this list is because they have an ideological agenda to seek to muzzle voices.
The Southern Poverty Law Center insisting the purpose of the annual list is to hold the groups accountable and try to prevent them from expanding. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Meantime, some of those so-called parents groups have ties to conservative lawmakers. Coming up here on the National Desk, grand jury testimony in the classified documents investigation, the response from the man in the hot seat, Donald Trump. Then why the Pope was in the hospital today and whether he's expected to be okay. Then a massive volcano erupting right now in the U.S., why the pictures are better than the concern. We'll be right back. Right now, some new developments in the classified documents investigation into former President Donald Trump. Former Trump aide Taylor Bodowitz has testified before a grand jury in Florida where special counsel Jack Smith is presenting evidence. And that former aide tweeted today saying, in what can only be described as a bogus and deeply troubling effort to use the power of government to get Trump, I fulfilled the legal obligation to testify in front of a federal grand jury, and I answered every question honestly. Florida grand jury has heard from several witnesses recently, separately from the grand juries in Washington, D.C. Trump denies any wrongdoing, calling this a, quote, fake investigation. Opening statements began today in the Parkland shooting trial of retired Broward Sheriff's Deputy Scott Peterson. They're charged with failing to confront the gunman in the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history that killed 14 people.
Go toward the gunshots. Train to go toward those shots, to find that shooter, because every shot could be a death.
The trial is expected to go on for 2 months. A jury of 4 women and 2 men will decide the outcome. Pope Francis underwent a successful surgery today. The Vatican says there were no complications in the 3-hour procedure to repair a hernia in the Pope's abdominal wall. The procedure came just 2 years after Francis had 13 inches of his colon removed because of inflammation and narrowing of his large intestine. The pontiff will stay at Rome's Gemelli Hospital for several days as he recovers there. An Axios survey of influential CEOs shows the executives are planning to invest more in their businesses and expect sales to remain unchanged from the first quarter. Along with that, they're also preparing to pull back on hiring slightly. None of this indicating a recession anytime soon. Confidence is growing after the U.S. managed to avoid a default. The Federal Reserve meets next week to discuss what to do with the interest rates. Meantime, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell has indicated that there will most likely be a pause in raising rates after 10 consecutive rate hikes that we've seen over the past few months.
A state-sponsored Chinese hacking group has been spying on critical U.S. infrastructure organizations, according to Microsoft and a joint cybersecurity advisory from the National Security Agency and other Western intelligence agencies. I'm here with Courtney from the Fact Check team. Courtney, what do we know?
Dee Dee, the hacking group dubbed Volt Typhoon has been targeting critical organizations since at least mid-2021 in sectors like manufacturing, transportation, government, and education, just to name a few. One major example we've seen is with the U.S. Navy. Now, this group takes a different approach to hacking. Instead of tricking a victim into downloading malicious files, they infect existing files to gather data.
Very concerning. Is hacking between the U.S. and China, is that common? Is that unusual? What do we know?
It's actually pretty common, but according to the Associated Press, analysts say this is one of the biggest cyber espionage campaigns against American infrastructure.
Microsoft said the attacks also targeted the U.S. island territory of Guam. Break down that claim.
Right, so this is important because there are U.S. military facilities on that island that would be key to responding to any conflict in the Asia-Pacific region. It's also a communication hub that connects Asia and Australia to the U.S. by submarine cables. Microsoft believes the group is working on ways to disrupt that critical communication infrastructure between the U.S. and Asia during future crises, which is significant given all of China's recent threats and efforts against Taiwan.
Definitely something that we're going to be watching very closely. Courtney, thank you. For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, scan that QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
We're taking the pulse of America, starting with the vote against the bill to criminalize drug possession in the city of Seattle.
You know, in a 5-4 vote, Seattle City Council members rejecting the drug criminalization legislation, which would have empowered the city attorney to prosecute public drug use.
Councilmember Sawant?
No.
Councilmember Strauss?
Yes.
A crowded room of constituents, some in favor of a yes vote, others passionate about the negative impacts incarceration would have on drug users.
It is not our civic duty to provide housing first for those who have chosen this lifestyle. And our country is proof that this is ineffective, short-term solution that cycles people in and out of jail rather than making any changes in society.
At an event downtown after the vote, I tried to talk to Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell about the council's decision. He told us he was not making statements to the camera, but did provide a written comment. The mayor said in part, quote, "It is unacceptable for people to consume illegal drugs in public spaces."
Starting this fall, all City of Austin employees are expected to commute to the office a minimum of 3 days a week. They're the latest major employer calling people back to work in person. It's something many former commuters are reluctant to do. As the pandemic dwindles in our rearview mirror, more employers are calling their workers back to the office.
We've seen that happen, kind of across the board from, the high-tech companies all the way down to smaller businesses.
Lisa K. Fahnensteel is the executive director at Movability, a nonprofit focused on improving mobility region-wide.
What's really important to us is that if employers feel the need to bring their employees back part of the time or all of the time, if they can couple that with some commuter benefits.
Fahnensteel says providing commute benefits for workers should be seen as an investment, not a cost.
Just a lot of internal fighting, if you will. And that's what, there comes a point in time where you're done. You're tired of it, It's just, just somebody help me because I can't do this anymore.
Sergeant Mark Myers served from 2003 to 2007 in the Marine Corps. He was deployed twice during the Iraq War, taking part in frontline action during the Battle of Fallujah in 2004. More than 10 years since his diagnosis with post-traumatic stress disorder, Sergeant Myers suffers from anxiety and panic attacks in public settings, self-isolation, withdrawal from family and friends, and hypervigilance. Myers' service dog is ready to go through Project Blue Line Canine. The only thing left is the cost. A GoFundMe is organized to help pay for the costs for the dog and its training.
Next, right here on the National Desk, as fears about artificial intelligence grow, technology could have a major positive impact on the medical field. More on that in 90 seconds. The next generation of medicine is upon us. Artificial intelligence upping the odds right now that doctors won't miss what could be critical to a patient's survival. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains how it's improving doctor-patient care.
Hey there, hello to you. AI, or artificial intelligence, has been used for years in medicine, but lately it has helped in detection and discovery in new ways that can save patients' lives.
It was just shocking because I have no risk factors other than being female.
She's cancer-free now, but when Jenny Dermody recently went in for her annual mammogram, she admits she got quite a scare.
I did my mammogram because it was something that I always do from a part of my wellness checkups, but it never crossed my mind that I was going to be a breast cancer patient.
Part of what helped make that diagnosis, however, is the next generation of medicine.
Do we know how much the accuracy improves with something like this?
Yeah, so there's been studies that have been done. There's actually a range within radiologists, but for the average radiologist, the sensitivity for this has increased somewhere between 5 and 6%.
You see that yellow circle? It is an AI notification on a mammography image such as Jenny's. It allows Dr. Anthony Antonopoulos, a radiologist with Ohio's TriHealth, to know where to further look immediately.
So the system that we use is something called Profound AI. It's an AI algorithm that runs concurrently in the background and assists the radiologist in interpreting the 3D or the tomosynthesis portion of the screening mammogram.
The AI analyzes each image as it's brought up. The markings are automatically generated where something appears out of the ordinary,
therefore alerting the radiologist to pay special attention to those areas on that exam.
Dr. Antonopoulos told me this AI program ups the odds of accurate callbacks.
When we can decrease those callbacks that generate all sorts of anxiety, generate extra expense, generate, appointments and people who have very busy lives, when we can decrease that as well, that's a win-win.
Now, the next version of this AI software, Dr. Antonopoulos told me, will take this all one step further. It will allow his team to compare previous mammograms and use an algorithm that would help detect changes. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Now back to you.
Right now, a volcano is erupting in the United States. We're going to take a look after this. Check this out. The second largest volcano in Hawaii started erupting today after a 3-month pause, according to the U.S. Geological Survey officials. And you can see it live right here. That's what it looks like at this very moment. It's happening within a closed area of the national park on Hawaii's Big Island. Kilauea is one of the world's most active volcanoes. An eruption in 2018 destroyed more than 700 homes. Scientists are now evaluating the current eruption and any associated hazards. So keep an eye on that, and we'll keep an eye on the story for you. That's going to do it for us right now. Join us tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk starting at 10 p.m. Eastern. You can always get more information all around the clock on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.